So second defective contract is voidable contract. So avoidable contract or voidable contracts happens when one of the contracting parties is incapacitated to give consent. No? Uh, like for instance, a minor. So a minor enters into a contract with another person. So this kind of contract is voidable. Or when a person is insane, unless he acted in lucid interval. So lucid interval is uh, the time when an insane person has a sound mind. No? Maayo iyang pangisip. Yung pangisip ba, maayo. So that is lucid interval. So when a person or an insane person is in lucid interval and he enters into a contract, that contract is valid. It's not voidable. So when it's entered into by a deaf mute who cannot read or write, or when it is entered by a person especially disqualified by law, such as civil interdiction, or when a person is under hypnotic spell or drunk. No? So we have discussed this before. These are the persons who are incapacitated to give consent. So one party is incapacitated, the other is not. No? So let's say the buyer is uh, legally capacitated and the seller is an insane person, buang ang nagbaligya. So that kind of a contract is voidable. Also, voidable is uh, a contract is also voidable when the consent of one of the parties is vitiated by mistake, intimidation, violence, fraud, or undue influence. No? We have discussed this before already. This is discussed in part 2. So the vices of consent are mistake, violence, intimidation, undue influence, and fraud. No? So we'll no longer discuss it here. But you have to make sure that only one of the parties' consent is vitiated by mistake, intimidation, violence, fraud, or undue influence. Like in the problem that I gave to you, where the person found a diamond ring, no? A diamond. The person found a stone which he thought was a diamond. So in reality, that stone was not a diamond, but he thought it was a diamond. So here, the founder of the stone was in mistake. No? His consent is vitiated by mistake. So he sold that diamond to another person, or he sold that stone to another person who also thought that that stone is a diamond. So these persons are, or the parties here are, the consent are vitiated by mistake. But in voidable contracts, there's only one party. Only one of the parties' consent is vitiated by a mistake. So in case the two parties' consent are vitiated by mistake, so that no longer is voidable but unenforceable. No? So should remember the two when one of the contracting parties incapacitated to give consent, and number two when the consent of one of the parties is vitiated by mistake, intimidation, violence, fraud, or undue influence. So avoidable contracts has an intrinsic defect. So in creating the contract, it is already defective. No? Now, it can be valid until such time it is annulled. So, valid until annulled. So, the defect is due to the vice of consent or legal incapacity of one of the parties. So, characteristics of voidable contracts is that it is effective until set aside. So, it is valid until set aside or annulled. No? So, may be assailed or attacked only in an action for that purpose. So, it cannot be collaterally attacked. So, direct attack only. So, can be confirmed, meaning it can be ratified. So, if the insane person or his guardians did not file the action, so the contract can be confirmed or ratified. So in that case, it is ratified. It can be assailed only by the party whose consent was defective or his heirs or assigns. So in case of the minor, the minor can assail it, meaning he can attack it. Or case of so only these persons, they are the ones who are given or afforded by law to attack the voidable contracts. So the person with legal capacity or with good consent cannot attack a voidable contract. So only those minors, insane, persons suffering from severe interdiction, hypnotized, or in a state of drunkenness. So these are the persons who can assail voidable contracts, but not those who are legally capable. Okay. So in one of the vices of consent is fraud. So we will discuss simulation of contracts. So what is simulation of contracts? This is the act of pretending to make a lawful or another kind of contract. So instead of, for an example of this one, FE has a loan with PO amounting to 10 million pesos, which is now due. And she has not paid. Now, FE is residing in a house and lot worth 6 million pesos. And which PO knows? The creditor knows. Now, FE is afraid that PO might sue her to demand the loan payment, the payment of the loan, excuse me, and attach her property in process. So, FE is afraid, that PO might sue her to demand the loan, attach her property in the process. So, what FE did, FE pretended to sell her property to her sister, Jam. So, yang baligya kunuhay. So, attachment means that in filing a case to ensure that the petitioner is given a satisfactory payment, then you have to attach the property. Or the property owned by FE will be seized by the court. So, kwaon's court, seized by the court, as a payment of FE's obligation of 10 million pesos. So here, FE sold the property. So there is a pretension to her sister that Jam is paying money, but in the reality, there is no payment that transpired. So there is no payment. So there is simulation of contracts. So this kind of an example is a case of absolute simulation here in number 1. What does absolute simulation means? That the parties in a contract do not intend to be bound by the contract at all. Thus, the contract is void, no? So, ito ni siya mo fall sa void contracts, the fourth defective contract. So, this is the case of the example where Fe pretended to sell her property to her sister. And the purpose is to evade attachment or seizure of the property by the creditor, Mr. Peo. Another kind of simulation of contract is when it is relative. So here, the real transaction is hidden. And the contracting parties conceal their true agreement, but there is binding effect, no? Because the parties does not, as long as the parties does not prejudice third persons. So walay creditors involved, no creditors involved. So no creditors are defrauded and not intended for any purpose contrary to law, morals, etc. No? So if the concealed contract is lawful, it is absolutely enforceable, provided it has all the essential requisites: consent, object, and cause. So as to third persons without notice, the apparent contract is valid for purposes beneficial to them. No? So the relative simulation of contract, this is a valid kind of contract. So I'll give you an example. If father would like to give property to his son, no? So in case of, instead of donating the property, he is going to make a contract of sale, no? So the deed being made here is not deed of donation, but a deed of sale. So there's a different contract. But the intention of the father is to give that property to the son. So it is there is intent of the party to transfer the property. So